Hello and welcome. My name is Rachel Priestman. I'm from Global Cooperation House in London. And today we're very happy to have with us in the studio Charlie Hogg from Australia. Welcome, Charlie.
Many thanks, Rachel. Lovely to be here.
Many of you will know Charlie already, but for those who don't, he's been meditating every day for over 40 years. And he looks after Rajyoga centers for the Brahma Kumaris in Australia, but also in Australasia. He spends a lot of the time traveling all around the world, sharing his insights and experiences. And he also helps internationally in looking after film production and publications production. So you have quite a wide brief. But today our topic is a happy Christmas. So I'd like to explore with you, Charlie, what does Christmas mean to us? And what can we do to ensure that it's something that's enriching and rewarding and, yes, happy? So perhaps we could start by tell me a bit about Christmas when you grow up. What was Christmas like to you as a child?
Actually, my memory, Rachel, was a wonderful time, actually. Christmas was always incredibly exciting for many different reasons. And I think, as you know, these days often it would begin 2-3 weeks before the 25th of December. And the family would put up a wonderful Christmas tree like this. And,
like this?
Yeah, it's incredibly beautiful. The same sort of thing with all sorts of lights and coloured baubles. But it was a family feeling. It was very much a family occasion. And I remember even perhaps before that, you know, the Christmas cards today in the sort of the world of the internet and emails, you don't get so many Christmas cards, but we would send hundreds to friends and family and so many parties. I remember, you know, party after party. And so it was a very lovely time. Australia, of course, is summer, which is a little bit unusual.
Quite different from the UK.
I've had Christmases at 40 degrees centigrade, and often people will go to the beach at different times. But Christmas Day itself, the family would wake up, and when you're very small children, you are told the myth of Father Christmas, that he is going to come down the chimney and bring gifts for you. And so it's a wonderful time. You know, we'd come in the morning and there was all these gifts around the tree and the family would open them. And then I can remember as a very young child going to my great-grandfather's home, and he had a wonderful banquet hall, and maybe 30 of us with my aunties and uncles and cousins, we would sit together and we all got together. I mean, it was probably the main time of year that the extended family came together.
Nowadays, Christmas is celebrated all over the world, and it's perhaps become something quite different. What do you see in terms of what you saw as a child and what you're seeing now?
I think for some, Rachel, it's still a religious occasion. And I think that's a minority today, but for the majority, and I find it quite fascinating, it's become a universal festival. I've been in Japan, which is fundamentally a Buddhist country. Christmas is absolutely huge. I've been in Dubai, which is, you know, a Muslim country, and Christmas is celebrated there. So in a way, Christmas has become more about sharing material things and perhaps a spiritual learning and a spiritual journey. And I remember actually a few years ago, I heard the Pope. He was asked what's his take on the world at the moment, and the Pope said something like the globalization of superficiality. I thought it was quite an interesting take, that everything has moved towards the superficial, and really for many, Christmas is an exchange of material things, which I think has moved a long way away from perhaps the exchange of love and respect and cooperation, which is really the gifts that people want.
Yeah. So for you, what do you see as the spiritual significance of Christmas?
The Christmas tree is probably the symbol that everyone remembers for Christmas. And I love this image because to me it really is like humanity is represented in this tree. The whole of humanity is represented by the tree. But what's lovely is that all the branches, the twigs, the leaves are connected to a trunk and a seed. And I love that sort of image that we all belong. And perhaps you can say that God is like the seed of the tree. And interestingly, there's the seed of the tree, and at the top of the tree there's often a star, which often I think is probably one of the most common representations of God being light, being like a star, a radiant point, or an angel at the top of the tree. Yeah. The Christmas tree, the whole image of it, I really love because it brings us together, and all the gifts are put at the bottom of the tree near the seed. And I think when the tree, the individuals, connect back to the seed, then we experience the gifts, the true gifts of love, of cooperation, of the realization of who I am and how to connect with God. We just see this tree, but I think its original idea was really to go back to the seed, and that's where all the beauty in life, the gifts of life, really come from.
That's lovely. So the gifts, the lights, all the beautiful decorations, the angel on top actually do have a significance. That
I think they do. And what I really love about it is that when you travel the world today, there's so much difference based on so many things. And what I love is that when you go back to the seed belongs to everyone. The seed connects to the whole tree. And originally we're all seeds. And yet when we take on only the identity of our body, we're separated by shape, colour, culture, religion. And that's the mentality which sort of divides. But this tree, I think, really reminds us we're a human family. We all belong to each other.
So it's really lovely, because what you're saying is actually there's something very unifying about this Christmas spirit.
Absolutely.
About humanity. It's not about just one particular religion. The idea is that it is what it's meant to be, peace and goodwill to all men.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, that's always my feeling of the Christmas spirit, that it's not just within a particular religion, but it's really, I think, the heart of Christmas, the essence, is about goodwill for absolutely everybody. And perhaps that's at the heart of all religions and all spirituality. The expression of love for God is to love and respect and each other in a very authentic and real way.
It could be said that sometimes we go into Christmas, we spend a lot of time with our family and friends, and then we find that we're not getting on with them too well. In fact, I've heard that lawyers and counsellors are particularly busy after Christmas.
Lawyers and counsellors start working way before Christmas, because I've actually heard that in America they have therapy groups from September onwards to deal with Christmas. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's really interesting because at the heart of perhaps the Christian religion is, mercy and compassion for each other. And yet we all know that there's differences, relationships create differences, and we actually, have fallings out with people. But to me, it's an inevitable thing that this actually happens. And the time of Christmas, I think, is a time to maybe, look deeply as to why these sort of things go on, why these differences really emerge, and what we need to do to resolve these differences.
Well, we do all have such a different sense of what is normal, and quite often we're not living with our family, and then we come together for a week or so and suddenly discover that everyone has very different ideas of what's the right thing to do.
They do. And sometimes I think, how when you are sitting with your family, you're watching the television, and you can extend that mercy and compassion for the people in Syria. But sometimes we forget that sitting beside me is a family member who's suffering, or someone I know who's suffering. And today there's so much, the real suffering is mental and emotional. And I remember I went on a speaking tour in Australia once with a man who has written books about depression. And he quotes the World Health Organization saying that 1 in 4 of us is suffering from depression. We might not have all the physical problems of a place like Syria or many parts of the world, but today I think the mental and emotional strain is enormous. And in psychology, depression is like a deep sadness that my dreams in life to be loved and valued hasn't really happened. But I think spiritually, depression is like a mourning for the loss of my true identity. Like I live my life, I have relationships, but often they're very superficial, and the real need to be loved and valued doesn't really happen. And that's perhaps the greatest sorrow that people carry in their hearts. And when it comes to Christmas, I think people remember that something's missing.
Yeah.
I'm present with my family, but sometimes the real quality of love that I feel I really would like to have isn't being experienced.
So in a way, as we approach Christmas, just to have that awareness that of my own expectations, but perhaps what can I do to help myself meet those expectations or have those expectations met? And that was really what you were talking about, thinking about my inequalities. Is that right?
Yeah. At the heart of spirituality, one of the things I love is that I'm responsible for how I feel. I often feel it's one of, like the first law of spirituality. And I think our expectations that others provide all my needs in life is totally unrealistic. And they will never be able to do that. And so people with high expectations are always disappointed. No one can live up to those expectations. But I think when we have a real spiritual approach to relationships, then, sometimes I feel all relationships do is trigger what's already in me. When I meet somebody, their face, their words, their behavior triggers feelings inside of me. And someone with spirituality takes responsibility for those feelings, but someone who doesn't perhaps projects back on the other person. And so we see a world, we see families just projecting back onto each other. The blame game is just so rife in our world today.
Can you explain a bit more about having a spiritual awareness or a spiritual approach to relationships? What do you mean by that?
As I was saying, I think first I take responsibility for my own feelings rather than projecting back onto others. And I think secondly, even my understanding of the other. We're both in a family together. Christmas is time for family, but I'm a soul on a journey and you're a soul on a journey. And each one of us is carrying our past with us. Our past is latent in our subconscious. And so sometimes the past story overlaps and influences our interaction. And I think someone with a spiritual context understands the bigger picture of relationships, because sometimes relationships are very natural and easy, and sometimes they're just incredibly hard work. Because the story of the past is overlaying on the present and disturbing our interaction. And if we don't have that context, then sometimes we feel very resentful and very hurt. And unfortunately, that is incredibly common today. A spiritual approach to relationships does, or to really help, is that you have a relationship with God. That is really the first relationship in life. And when that's real and I feel secure in that relationship, I'm not so needy. I'm not looking to you to provide every need in my life. I'm actually taking from God, and then I can give. And I've often observed the happiest people are the givers. And the more you give, the less the habit to take disrespect, take sorrow from others. And I think a spiritual approach is I take from God, and in my interaction with others, I give. And sometimes they won't give me love and they won't give me respect. But it doesn't dent my self-respect, I can remain intact even when people perhaps do disrespect me or criticize me. My self-respect isn't destroyed by that.
I'm not needy. That's a very nice point, because I know myself, it's like giving a gift actually gives me a lot more happiness than receiving a gift.
Absolutely. And Rachel, I often feel the real gift of Christmas is to give respect, to give love, and to see virtue. And what I've done many times at Christmas time when we write cards, I often don't even give a present, but I write the virtues and the value I see in another and what I appreciate. Honestly, people love it. And last year my father turned 90 around Christmas time. And I wrote a long letter to him of everything I've learned from him and what I appreciate about him. I couldn't believe how touched he was, because I think we live in a world where there's not much respect, and people unfortunately don't have much self-respect. And so we tend to think negatively about ourselves and negatively about others. And when someone expresses appreciation, that is such an extraordinary gift. And I feel it doesn't even have to be through words. I think, to me, the greatest expression is through my eyes and my face, because feelings are passed in that way. And when people get that feeling that you value them, that you love them and you respect them, to me, there's no greater gift we can give to another person.
Absolutely, and giving them our attention, giving them our company.
Absolutely, yeah.
Lovely, lovely.
Yeah.
Can I go back to something you said earlier? You mentioned about, we may be watching television and we're thinking about the people in Syria. You know, Christmas is a time when we're celebrating and we're getting together and we're having parties and we're feasting, whatever. And yet elsewhere in the world, people are really suffering. There's conflict, there's poverty, whatever. Should we feel guilty about that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we should be guilty, but we should be cognizant of, because one of the things of today's life is we're so needy that life becomes quite selfish, so to speak. I'm only sort of focused on what I need. And I know that many people at the time of Christmas, they give to appeals, they become very aware that I want to help the poor. I know many people in Sydney who on the morning of Christmas, people who are homeless, etc., they'll go and give them food rather than even spend time with their own family, which I think is really beautiful. I don't think we should feel guilty, but I think we have to realize we're living in a very, very challenging and difficult world. And a part of the Christmas spirit is within my own little microcosm, my little world. I do what I can to make a better life for others around me. And I feel so much of it is, you can give material gifts, and that's fine. I think that's nice. But when the material gift comes with a sense of love and respect and valuing, appreciating, all that feeling, I think then it really becomes a true Christmas. And so I really become aware that I'm going to spread the Christmas spirit within the environment I can influence. But one of the things I think I've loved from the Brahma Kumaris is that the Brahma Kumaris, one of the most powerful teachings in recent years that influences me, is to have good wishes and pure feelings for people I know, but for the wider world too. Maybe sometimes people say, well, what people need is food and whatever.
Yeah.
We can't underestimate the effect of goodwill. I think there's an extraordinary power in those good wishes. It's like an energy of the mind. And if you think today, if the minds of the world are resonating on the frequency of sorrow and despair and unhappiness, then that energy is influencing everything. But when I really resonate on the frequency of having good wishes for myself, firstly, and then goodwill for my immediate community and family, and then for the wider world, I think it really has a positive effect and on everything.
How do you bring that practically into your life? Do you sit down and say, I'm going to have good wishes, or is there a sort of practice you have?
I'm a great believer that the power of thought is the greatest power. Light, I think, moves at something like 186,000 miles a second, but thought is instant. And I think one of the things we underestimate is the power of a pure thought, a loving thought. And to me, when I sit and remember God, when my mind remembers God, that energy, that pure divine thought, which is selfless, is unlimited. It reaches every corner of this world and further. It's like you live in London, I live in Australia. Sometimes I may just think, Rachel, because for some reason you've thought of me, and I pick up that thought message. And we often don't think about it again, but we're always picking up thought messages. Thoughts are instant. So sometimes we think, well, are my thoughts having an effect? And to me, they have an enormous effect. And so that's why I think when I meditate on a regular basis, it's sustaining myself, but it's also sustaining when I'm happy, my immediate family, but that energy really does reach a wider world.
So I can have an effect with my thoughts on people away from me, can I also have an effect on my thoughts on people who maybe have passed away recently? Because Christmas can be a difficult time for people who've just lost a family member or a friend or something. Is that also something that can happen?
Absolutely. Often I think, when someone dies, as we know that the soul departs the body, that soul is living somewhere. And as we often understand, the soul moves into the womb and often reflects on its life. And I always say to people that when someone has died, if we're sending them thoughts of sorrow, is that going to really help them? Actually, it's our love and our goodwill. Actually, they want us to be happy. And I always remember, because your thought energy will reach them wherever they are.
That's very beautiful.
Yeah, the sense of loss, I think, increases their sense of loss too. But, really when we remember them with those loving thoughts, I think that energy reaches, and that's a support for them in their continuing life journey.
Because it's true, even on a practical basis, if someone is encouraging me and thinking good things about, just mentally, and thinking good things for me or wishing me well, that's much more helpful for me than someone worrying about me or being sad that I'm not there or whatever. It empowers me, it gives me energy rather than sort of draining my energy.
One of the beauties of a spiritual life is you become aware of subtle things. And, when you communicate with somebody, they say there's 3 levels of communication. You and I are talking to each other. But I've read that 90% of the impact of any connection is non-verbal, is your face and your vibrations. So, and when you get 2 messages from people, one is what you hear and one is what you feel. You always trust your feelings. And so the feelings are actually the powerful thing. And when you meditate, it's like you fill up your mind, the vessel of your mind, with divine feelings, pure feelings. And so when you come in touch with people, they feel safe with you. They feel comfortable with you. They don't feel judged by you. And it's it's a very, very subtle thing. And often I think that some people, they wonder why people don't really love them or they can't come close. And I think when you carry subtle things in your mind, the past history of people's past story, then people do feel it. Yeah. And that's really the reason when I see virtue, when I hold the value of another in my vision, to me that's such a great gift. And when I talk about this, always I remember the head of the Brahma Kumaris, the last one, Daddy Prakashmini, because to me, whoever she met, she held their value in her vision, and it made you feel special, everyone who came in front. And I think, is there a greater gift you can give another person? Is there a greater way to celebrate Christmas than these benevolent feelings? Because in our world, which is so negative and difficult, if I can spread these benevolent feelings, it creates such a beautiful atmosphere. So
Charlie, one final question, summing up really all we've said. Is there one thing that you think people could do to help make this Christmas a happier and more fruitful one for them? What would you suggest?
Rachel, I think that all of us love the idea of spreading goodwill and giving the gift of respect and love to everyone. But where do I get the inner strength? For me, I think to sit in front of God as an unlimited source of love, an ocean of love, and allow myself to be completely loved. To me, that creates such a different feeling inside of me. And when I experience that myself, I notice my self-respect goes right up. And when you're in that state of self-value, I think you can respect and value everyone around you in a natural way. It's not that I'm forcing myself, I'm putting pressure. It's a natural consequence of that true relationship with God. And I think that, the world is such a difficult world. Things are changing so much around us. And I feel that to adopt spirituality, spiritual attitudes and outlook, is a wonderful way to really, celebrate Christmas. And just as I meet everybody, think, what gift do I want to give? Why not give the gift of respect, knowing people's weaknesses? It's a choice. I decide I'm going to focus on what's valuable in them. And to me, that beautiful attitude is like spraying a fragrance in my family, spraying a fragrance in my workplace. And it can really make an enormous difference to, the quality of family life and how I feel about myself.
Charlie, thank you very much for sharing many very useful and interesting points about how we can really appreciate Christmas in a refreshing and fulfilling way. And I know that Charlie joins me in wishing you all a very, very happy Christmas. And thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.